Welcome to Girl Choose Yourself, where we're trading self-doubt for self-trust and settling for soaring. I'm Eimear, your host, and together we're building the confidence to create lives so deliciously bold that they scare us a little, but in the best possible way. Because life's too precious to stay cozy in our comfort zones. It's time to choose ourselves for lives that are fabulous and soulfully fulfilling. So let's go. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. I'm thinking today about growing up in Ireland and this time of year. And around this time in school, we would make these little crosses out of rushes. And you might remember them if you were Irish or if you visited Ireland at this time of year. Like thin green reeds, and you fold it into a kind of woven cross. And then you tie the ends together and then brought them home with you to hang in the kitchen or above a doorway. And if you've ever been in Ireland, you may well have seen one in somebody's home or in a pub. And we were always told this was for St. Brigid's Day. But if I'm honest, I never really understood who Brigid was. And there was never a particular day to celebrate her, and we didn't hear the story of her beyond the making of this cross. It was all about St. Patrick's Day in March. And relatively recently, I find myself asking and wondering, who was this woman? And what exactly was the festival, this festival of Imbolc that I would hear about at this time of year? I'd heard the name but never really understood it, and I've become more and more interested in my Celtic heritage, and particularly women in the Celtic tradition as I've gotten older. And the more I started digging, the more I realised this is one of those stories that we inherit without ever really being invited into it. So today I want to invite you into this story. It's a story about a moment in the year, this time of year, when the light begins to come back, and about a woman whose flame people refuse to let die. First, let's talk about something that always feels slightly off. And that is January 1st and the beginning of the new year. We're told it's the beginning of the year and all that messaging. Fix everything, change everything, become something else, set those goals, make it all different this time round, get involved, get energized, more. But it arrives right after the Christmas season, the holiday season, in the darkest, coldest part of winter, when our bodies are tired, our nervous systems want rest, we're more likely to want to eat soup and thick, crusty bread with lots of butter. Is that just me? Be wearing sweaters and craving quiet and warmth and soothing and comfort. Nothing about it really feels like the time for a big beginning and newness. And that's because January 1st isn't actually rooted in nature. It comes from ancient Rome. The Roman Empire moved the start of the year to January to honour Janus, a god who looked backward and forward. It made sense politically and it made sense administratively, but it doesn't make sense in our bones. It's always felt off for me. Seasonally, the real feeling of beginning arrives later, doesn't it? And that's where this festival of Imbolc in the Celtic tradition lives. Imbolc is Imbolc, Imbolc. What is Imbolc? It's a festival that falls around the 1st of February. It sits halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So it's this halfway point where winter is still here, the cold hasn't gone anywhere, but something subtle has shifted. The days are getting a little bit longer, light lingers a little bit more in the afternoon. There's a sense that, underground things are stirring, the seeds are stirring. In farming communities, lambs begin to be born, milk flows again, and the name Imbolc is thought to mean something like in the belly. pregnant, gestating, potential forming before anything is yet visible. It's not spring yet, but it's the sense of the promise of spring, the promise of new life and growth and what's to come. And that feels important, especially I think for women in midlife, or really anyone who's in a transition phase, because there's a lot of pressure to go, do it now, everything. But nature, I think the rhythm of nature is really important to connect into and listen to, because it kind of says first comes the quiet stirring. And there's a lot of outside messaging that doesn't let us be with that. Enter Brigid. Let me tell you about Brigid. Before she was Saint Brigid in Ireland, she was something much older. In pre-Christian Ireland, Brigid was a goddess, and she was associated with healing and poetry and fertility and protection and inspiration and fire. And she was connected to sacred wells and to the hearth of the home. She was connected with midwife energy, creative energy, life-bringing energy. And when Christianity came and spread throughout Ireland, many local traditions were erased, but some were absorbed. The more important ones were absorbed, and Brigid became Saint Brigid. The goddess became the saint. And people kept celebrating her at the same time of year, because some stories are just too beloved to let go. But when I was growing up in Ireland, I never knew that she wasn't a saint, a young Christian woman who had done something to some miracle to be called a saint. And this cross part had always fascinated me. If Brigid, as I learned when I got older, began as a pagan goddess, why is her symbol this cross? The Brigid's cross that we made in school when I was a child, and children still make in schools in Ireland, probably predates Christianity. And scholars believe it may have been an older protective or solar symbol, woven from rushes and hung in homes to guard against misfortune and fire. Again, the protective energy of Brigid. And later it was reinterpreted through Christianity as a cross. So instead of the symbol changing, the meaning wrapped around it changed. And I like that, I guess. I like that traditions can survive by adapting, and then we can learn about the history and the more ancient story. It also makes me think about how often women's stories are softened or rewritten for other purposes, but the real roots still survive beneath them. And I think this story matters because of that, because so many women's stories disappear. We really have to hunt for the answers often, or to ask ourselves that question, where are the women? Where are the women's voices? Where are those stories? And we have to go searching. Often their work is forgotten, their power is minimized, their influence minimized, their names are lost. But here's a woman, from goddess to saint, whose presence people refused to forget. Her flame kept burning, and maybe that asks something of us. What parts of you have gone quiet? Maybe reflect on that. What parts maybe have you softened or played down to belong, to fit in, to not rock the boat? And what parts refuse to disappear? Maybe this season is asking them to come back. In Ireland, it happened a few years ago, and I was really pleased that there was a strong movement to reclaim St. Brigid, and that there should be a national holiday to celebrate her. And that finally happened a few years ago. We all heard of St. Patrick. But now St. Brigid has her place, her rightful place in the Irish calendar, and all the kids get a day off school. Always important. I think I've become more curious and more interested in looking at the calendar, looking at turning points in the year, connecting more to the calendar of nature and less to the artificial calendars. And this turning point in the year of Imbolc, this midway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, this turning point isn't just Celtic. Around this time of year, many cultures celebrate Lunar New Year, and we often call it Chinese New Year, but versions of it are celebrated across East and Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Mongolia, Korea, Tibet, and beyond. And their calendar follows the moon, so the date shifts each year. I find this really fascinating, and I wish I'd learned about it when I was in school. But I'm always curious and always learning. And the Lunar New Year always lands in this late winter period. So different cultures, same wisdom, life begins stirring again now. Hope returns quietly. Not fireworks of transformation, but just the first whisper of possibility. So here's what I invite you to do. I'm really thinking about this in the run up to the Lunar New Year, between this time of Imbolc and the Lunar New Year, thinking about what in me is waking up again at this time of year. What dreams are there bubbling up that want to ignite? And what small flame am I ready to tend to again? Maybe tonight or sometime this week, you might like to mark this ritualistic time of year. Just the beginning of the newness, of things stirring, of possibility. You could light a candle, sit quietly, just journal a little. What do you want to welcome back into your life? Maybe speak it aloud. Nothing elaborate. It doesn't have to be grand. I think it's the simple moments of silence and quiet, self-created ritual that's often the most potent, because there's no performance for anyone else in it. It's true and honest and authentic, and it's for you, and it just is you connecting in to what matters. And this moment always reminds me of a poem that I may have shared with you before. I know I shared it in some of the live communities before, and it's by John O'Donoghue, who's an Irish poet, sadly no longer with us. And it's about thresholds and courage and stepping into what is not fully visible yet and having the courage to do that. So I want to offer it to you, to leave you now with his words. And the name of the poem is For a New Beginning. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the grey promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure, hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon, You will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. I hope you found this episode helpful, inspiring, nourishing, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Next week, we will begin a series of guest interviews, and I'm excited to introduce you to so many wonderful women who are smart, who are wise, who are doing amazing things in this world, and you're going to love it. I'll see you next time. Take care of you. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning into the episode this week. I hope you got a lot out of it, and if you did, please share it with somebody who you feel would benefit, and leave a review. Always greatly appreciated. Lots of free and paid resources to take things a step further. You can find those in the show notes. And hey, if nobody has told you this yet today, you are amazing, and the world is a far more beautiful place because you're here with us all. Stay cool. Bye.